And I just want to welcome you all in as you begin to arrive. Please let me know in the comments where you're coming in from. Just a brief thing about yourself, where you are. And as you begin to do that, I don't normally do these kind of things, not the webinar, but what I'm about to do. But today's quite a pertinent day, really. And I just want to take a moment, doesn't have to be a minute, but just a moment to pause, to reflect on this day about suicide, about the mission that we're involved in, and to anyone who may have lost a loved one. And so let's just take a pause now, just a moment, just to acknowledge. Okay, thank you. And yeah, it's a bit like one of those hugs that lingers a little longer than socially acceptable. But that's what we like to do here, to connect, to be present. And ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Adam Carr, our brother from America, who is pivotal in Save a Warrior, an organization that we're going to speak about today and overlap. And yeah, welcome, Adam. It's great to see you.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate that. And it's an honor to be here today and to speak with you gentlemen. And, I'm coming to you guys live from Ohio right now. This is the state here in the United States that houses the National Center of Excellence for Complex Post-Traumatic Stress. That's a property and a center that we worked really, really hard and really diligently over the last 12 years to bring to fruition. So happy to talk about that and just honored to be here today with you guys.
Amazing. That wasn't the birthplace of Save a Warrior, though, was it?
No, we were born and raised out in California, and the birthplace. Not to get too esoteric here, right? But the birthplace really comes from this downline, dating back all the way to Aristotle. So one could say, we were born long before. People have been doing this work that we're steeped in for a very, very long time. We're just fortunate enough in this time and place to be carrying that message, that continued message of hope and inspiration. And again, looking forward to talking to everybody about what it is we do and how it is we have such an impact in our community.
Yeah, and we'll get into that for sure. In particular, that piece about the, not to get too esoteric, as you said, but there is a storyline, there is a mythology, there is a grand narrative that's being woven through Save a Warrior. Mm-hmm. And we'll dive into that for sure. But I just want to mention to everybody watching now, if you're able to drop questions into the chat, please do. Tom is in the background, and I'm already seeing a lot of people saying, Tom invited me, so he's been hard at it and sending those links out. So I appreciate you all for being here. But please do drop the questions in there. It's going to be a fairly informal chat-based questions and answers kind of format today. Nothing too strict. And so please join in. That's the first thing. Well, there is a statistic in America, and the difference between the UK and America in terms of how the culture sort of treats its veterans and interacts with its veterans, supports them, etc., is something that's always brought up, right? It's something that both Americans acknowledge they do well with their veterans and first responders, and Britain also acknowledges that America does well. And we kind of follow a few trends trying to catch up with that. But there is a statistic that sort of caught my attention. There's 46,000 other veteran charities that focus on supporting veterans. So what would you say is that really distinguishes Save a Warrior from all of those?
Yeah, so what designates a veteran service organization here in the United States is really a tax code, and it's called a 501c3. And it's something you have to apply for to be if you were to go to a website, right? Instead of it being a .com, it'd be a .org. there's just a different designation. It's something that would seek donations, not generation of revenue, right? Like a traditional business. And what separates us from the rest of the 46,000 veteran service organizations is the 501c3 piece is really nothing more than a tax code. We're actually a production company, and our team is full of artists. And our job, our sole purpose, really, and mission is to communicate transformation. And so we're something different altogether, something very, very differentiated. We pride ourselves on our ability to use novelty to communicate that transformation. Some of that is like I shared. I mean, we've pulled the best of information from the philosophers era all the way through now. So we're talking, mythology, the mythopoetic, neurobiology, biology, communication, anthropology. We're pulling physics in here. We're talking about quantum physics. There are different pieces that we've synthesized that are best in class, pieces of thought leadership, best in class research, best in class pieces of art. I mean, we're talking Academy Award winning films that we've pulled in such a novel way that there really isn't anything like it out there. And we continue to get that feedback.
Yeah, amazing. So how would you define transformation? And maybe that's something that somebody right now who's listening to this, they are potentially suffering with, a diagnosis of PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
They're in a particularly troublesome place, let's just say. And you mentioned the word transformation.
Yep.
How can you sort of dive into that a little bit to sort of unpack it and to make it tangible for those that really would benefit from receiving this transformation?
Yep, of course. And this isn't something that's isolated to just veterans and first responders. For us, it is. Now, we communicate transformation, and if somebody was to ask me that question, like when, all the time. And it's whether we're having a conversation like right now, or I'm up on a stage somewhere, or our founder, Dr. Jake Clark, is on a stage somewhere speaking, or just we're having a casual conversation with somebody, on the way out to the parking lot. There is a different way from an ontological perspective. So, like, how am I being? If we want to define ontology, that's a term that Landmark uses. That's a term that you can trace back to Martin Heidegger and to some of the German philosophers. But we define transformation essentially as we are laying siege, or we are blowing the mind. So whether you have a religion or not, one of the most important things, if you're going to come sit and see in our program, is that you at least can have the ability and the humility to recognize that I'm not God, right? And that there may be some higher power out there for me. There may be something beyond me. Because if I'm God, there's already a slew of problems going on a daily basis. Certainly, if we want to delve into narcissism as a theme, right? And we understand that each person that's coming in the seat does have a soul. They do have a true self. They do have a God within that's connected to everybody, right, and including the higher power. But the mind is something else altogether. And the mind, ever since we were kids, ever since really maybe that first break in affinity in our lives, where something happened that made us wake up, that made us realize, oh wait, like this is maybe going to be a challenge. That changes us, and that gets a ticker running, and all of a sudden there's almost a voice inside our head. And I encourage anyone that's listening to this to challenge that in a way that, you may be thinking, well, there's not a voice in my head. Like, I'm not in a mental asylum. I'm just walking around every day on the street. It's like, all right, so I want you to just do an exercise with me then right now while we're on this webinar. I want you, with your mouth closed, inside of your head, to say hello. Now, did everybody hear hello in your head? Because you should have. I know I heard it. Did you hear it, Adam?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. So the question I'll pose it to you is, well, who said hello and who heard hello? Right? So we're using, again, ancient technology, right? We use the term technology. That's just not synonymous with microcomputers and semiconductor chips. That is an ancient term, right? The Aztecs, the Egyptians, different cultures have used technology to advance their civilizations, to transform their civilizations. We use an ancient technology, which is simply breath work, which is meditation, right? To slow down, almost like you did, to get aware, to get present, like we did at the beginning of this episode, to just get into a place of reflection and realize that hello that we heard is not really what's going on, right? That hello is something that's been running since we were a kid, and there's a way to actually turn that off. And one can't truly transform in life until that distinction's been made, right? Because if not, we're running around like a program. There's a reason they call TV, television, the tube, the telly. It's a program. The reason they call it programming at nighttime, right? One can't have a transformation without having a distinction and realizing, oh wow, I'm seeing or I'm looking in a way I've never looked before. Without having completions. Completion in life is how you have something or someone, and it goes like this essentially. And think of this for all of you married folks that are out there. If you're with somebody, the marriage maybe started out strong, maybe it started out uh, with the honeymoon phase is what we call it here in America, where things are just wonderful, right, for the first 6 months, year, and then it almost seems like things start to fade. And the reason they do, for the most part, is something called resentments, which is a word I think we're all familiar with. And that's really built from having expectations from other human beings, from our partner, that are not met, that are generally not vocalized. And so these resentments build up. If someone is incomplete with another human being, that means one of two things, right? They don't accept them for who they are, and they don't accept them for who they are not. So, in order for us to get complete with another human being, we must first accept them for who they are and who they are not, right? We are all limited. A lot of people hold up in life with situations and other human beings is that right there. They're incomplete with them. They're walking around, and this is what causes resentments. This is what causes failed of or lack thereof of strengthened relationships. And this is ultimately what causes us to carry around anger inside, where we're incomplete with these things. And for a lot of folks, it's with their parents. For a lot of folks, it's with things that happened from childhood. For a lot of folks in our community, it's also with things that happened overseas. And there's very, very powerful ways to get complete. That's something that we do in our program. So we have the distinction, we have the completion. Declarations are the third piece that how we communicate transformation. And we do that in a way that, for America, and you guys will get cheeky about this, right? But for us, declaration's a pretty important word, right? Because was really us, our founding fathers, signing a document saying we declare, we put our life on the lines by signing this, because if we are caught, we will be killed for treason. We declare our independence, um, and the irony is it's from you guys, right? But this was hundreds of years ago. And now UK and the Brits are arguably our greatest partners on the planet. So it's interesting how it all worked out, right? But that declaration was really important. It wasn't a commitment. It wasn't a resolution like we make at New Year's, which are frankly worthless. At least here in
Mhm.
America, we make resolutions. We say we're going to go to the gym. We do really well for about a month, and then it falls right off. There's something different, with using certain pieces of language in the culture that really, really, really matter, especially when you put your life on the line for it. So we have that intentionality in our programming. The last piece is integration, and the integrated piece really is integrating survival traits, and we have certain methodologies to integrate those. Usually, it takes longer than the 72 hours that they come to see us, but at least that spark is there to say, hey, I'm at a fork in the road. I was going this way. I'm actually going to go this way, and I'm going to lean into the pain, so that the true transformation I'm looking for is on the other side. Versus, hey, I'm going to continue down this path and just continue to drift and just like get by, right? So the DCDI is what we call that. I know that was a long answer, but hopefully that conveyed what
Mhm.
transformation means to us, because we are blowing the mind, and the mind has not been our friend for the majority of our life. It has caused us to live through fear, and we believe that everything we've ever wanted in life is on the other side of that fear. And that's what this program does essentially, is it dissolves the fear and it creates a white space to create, define, and really move forward in a life that we all deserve to live.
Yeah, beautiful. And I'm also very aware and conscious of you are communicating transformation to me and to us at this time, but I'm also conscious of those that may not be initiated into this sort of languaging and structure. So I just want to
Yep.
create some structure around that, some form, make it a little tangible for those wondering what Save a Warrior is, but more importantly, the how of Save a Warrior. And so what you described there, obviously I'm very, very familiar with it, but essentially you were describing what happens in particular with the first 3 phases of that, with integration being that fourth. And, you know, those 3 things happen live in person
Yep.
over 72 hours, right?
That's correct. Yeah. And the word novelty is something that is really, it's really important for all of us, right? Novelty means new. And it's something that can make a situation that appears otherwise frozen unstuck. This is why some of us that are listening to this webinar have been touched, moved, and inspired by a film. We've been touched, moved, and inspired by an artist or a piece of art, right? What is art? You know, art imitates life, life imitates art. Art can be something as simple as a drawing or a picture. It can be a video, it can be music. It encapsulates a lot of different things. It can be a play, but it's really, art is beautiful, and art is something that was created by veterans, by the way. Art in its truest form of getting up on stage and acting was a way for them to work through trauma, you know, coming back from these different triumphs and these different periods of war. It was a way to work through that in front of the public, to put the vulnerability on stage. And I think that that's really powerful, because art is such an important part of this. Novelty is such an important part. And why would somebody in UK watch Manchester United play a football game, right? Well, they don't know what the score is going to be, right? They may, in their own confidence, say, "Oh, well, we know we're going to win," but you don't really know. So you go to the game, you go to the match to watch it, because you're like, I want to see what happens. There's that novelty there. And then when what you've always hoped happens tribally, you know, inside of this stadium, which again was, you know, comes from Romans, right? They built these cathedrals for us to go and take part in and have community. And there may be a pejorative sense of like, oh, these are meant to distract us from society. Well, for men, for the most part, if we didn't have stadiums right now all over the world, one might argue that this world would be a much worse place, because it is creating people of tribes and community. And if that energy was not dispersed together in unison at these football matches or here at football games here in the United States, where's that energy going to go? Maybe in a worse place, right? So it's actually, we believe sports, you know, is a very, very important function over here. The same novelty occurs in a movie. Why do we go to the silver screen? Why do we sit down behind a film, right, and watch a great movie? Well, we want to watch it unfold. We want to see what the lessons are to learn. We want to watch that hero or heroine's journey. That same novelty is baked into Save a Warrior in that 72 hours. And the only reason why I really just hit on those 4 themes is because I don't want to give anything else away. So a participants that's coming to see me, or they're coming to see you guys, they should know as little as possible about it. They should just know, like, I have to trust these guys and that I'm ready to be done suffering. And if one in life is ready to be done suffering, and they can be completely available in terms of like, hey, I can take the cotton, you know, out of my ears, and I can put it into my mouth, and I can just listen to you guys for 3 days, because maybe, just maybe, you know what you're talking about. They will have a transformative experience, and that's what I've seen personally in the last 8 years, and with the thousands of men and women that I've had the ability to have an impact on.
Yeah. How can you make it absolutely clear or express and communicate to somebody watching right now who may be done suffering, but they don't want to admit that they're suffering? So there's an element of denial in there that I want to touch on as well. How do you communicate to that person, just to, that maybe, just maybe, this might be for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I think I can probably talk best. Well, I can talk to the men and the women, but this is definitely aimed at the men that we see, because like we serve about 75-25. So we go above and beyond for the women in our country. We're very proud of that. I think there's around 18% of women serve. we make it to point to offer up even more seats than are serving statistically. But I think there comes a point in life, you can, and Jordan Peterson does a great job of this, by the way. I don't know if you're familiar with him, out of Canada, brilliant man, talking about the story of Peter Pan, right? And what does Peter Pan do? He wants to avoid responsibility for his life. This story of Peter Pan and Wendy. And Wendy is like wants Peter Pan to get serious and settle down. But Peter Pan, he's not ready. He sees Captain Hook. Captain Hook's the only adult in Neverland. He sees how miserable Captain Hook is. And meanwhile, he's watching Captain Hook get chased by this alligator who has a clock, right? Which represents time, right? And Captain Hook is terrified of time. He doesn't want anything to do with it because Captain Hook has realized I'm getting old and this time is coming after me and it's going to eat me. That realization. And Captain Hook has not become the man he's wanted to become. And Pan sees that, right? And so he wants to just keep playing with the Lost Boys. Pan has Tinkerbell, who he's chasing around. Tinkerbell in today's society can maybe be looked at as fantasy, right, or pornography, which is something that plagues our community. It's something that takes time, right? It takes time away from people because they're searching for it and they're watching it. And in the work that we, not to cast any judgment, but in the work that we do, I mean, we also work on something called ACE surveys, which is adverse childhood experiences. And we realize, like, for instance, in the porn industry or Tinkerbell, right, that the average ACE score of somebody in that community is probably 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So there's been serious abuse for them to even go into that industry, right? And so that's essentially what you're consuming, right? If you're on the other end of that, and that takes a realization, that takes a different level of looking to understand. But to get back to Peter Pan, if you don't start, you can mess around in your early 20s, right? And sample things and take risks and try to figure out life. If you haven't started to really figure life out by the time you're 30, meaning like you haven't had your transformation as a human being, and you're not completely like satisfied and you don't have the vitality that you're looking for, and you're not waking up saying like, come on world, like I'm ready to go out and do this, like I'm excited, I have enriched relationships, my soul feels fulfilled, I have a community of people that I love, I feel connected, I don't have any fear in my life, I know who I am and I know what I was sent here to do. If you haven't realized that by 30, and you don't have your finances straight and you don't have your life straight, you're starting to get into a place of trouble. And if you haven't realized that by 40, you're in big trouble because you can mess around in your 20s, as I shared. You cannot spend your 30s fooling around. And no offense to like the service industry, because the service industry is necessary function of our societies, right? But that industry is largely created for entry level jobs, people that are just hitting the ground, people in their 20s. There's not a lot of people that are in their 40s that just are so excited and thrilled to go sign up for a third shift as a bartender and work nights around alcoholics, that are loud. Like that's a job for a younger person. And I've worked those jobs, right? So I understand that. I think a lot of us have. There's a time to get serious in life. So when I say ready to be end suffering, right? As a veteran and first responder specifically, like if those pieces I spoke to of fulfillment, vitality, connectedness, love, right? We define love from The Road Less Traveled, which comes from M. Scott Peck, right? He was an Army psychiatrist turned psycho spiritualist who wrote a New York Times bestseller that was on the bestseller list for 13 years. Like, how difficult that is to be on the New York Times bestseller list for 13 years. That book was the zeitgeist of its time. And he defines love as the extension of his own ego boundary. So for me, it's the extension of my own ego boundary to nurture the spiritual growth of another human being. And with that, I have no problem saying I love you to people that I meet. I have no problem for that rooting for people that I don't necessarily agree with or that I don't like. Like that's what keeps my heart wide open is trying to have empathy, trying to put myself in other people's shoes. And at the end of the day, like if you're listening to this and you're not, this same level of fulfillment is not there, then we have a term of art for that. It's called drifting. And so like you don't necessarily have to be in a place where you're like this, right? But you do have to start to get honest, and one does have to say, you know what, like maybe a time or two I've thought about it. What if life was like if I wasn't here? And like that's a dangerous thought to have as an inception, because that just goes down a path where it's like that starts to creep in more and more and more. And you might have a thought while you're driving, you might have a thought whenever. And that is here in the United States, at least, I don't know the statistics in the UK, but I think in the United States, the statistics was 1 out of 4 people in the United States at this current time in 2024 is going through a mental health crisis. 1 out of 4. Well, what's a
Mm.
mental health crisis? That is the mind losing control of itself. The mind that I described, which has been clicked on, and if we want to get into something called internal family systems, we have a term of art for that. You can look this up. Richard Schwartz is the author and the doctor behind that, but it's the manager, and that manager's been running and running and running, and it will quite literally drive us crazy, right? So I know that was a little bit of a more detailed answer or comprehensive answer, but that's the way I like to look at it. And so hopefully, if somebody's sitting there and you're not feeling that fulfillment, you're like, hey, tell me more, because like I'm actually interested in this. Because this is really it's a different way of looking at life. It's a different way of waking up. It's a different way of perceiving, interacting, communicating than anything the culture's ever taught us. And it's really, really powerful, and it truly is life changing. And it's something that I've had the privilege of taking part in and seeing, and that's impacted myself. It's really altered for me the way that I look at the world. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't try to live, eat, and breathe, communicate. The lessons, the wisdom that's been passed down to me, and my life just continues to get richer. And every 8 years, the past 8 years, Adam, has been better and better and better and better. And that's how I know I'm doing the right thing. Is my life continues to get more fulfilled, filled with more people that I love in my life, richer in terms of spirituality, the things that really matter in life, right? And
Mm.
oh yeah, by the way, the professional, the financial, the other things that are really incidental when you think about it at the end of life when we take our last breath, those have been getting better too, and that's how I know like I'm on the right path.
Beautiful. And just to really highlight that distinction there made between suffering and struggle, I often quote it as that, suffering's a choice. Struggle is like this noble burdening of responsibility or something that is important, not just for yourself, but those around you. That's a struggle, right? That's the burden of the cross going up the hill to be crucified. That's the ultimate struggle, but it becomes ever enduring beyond your days. And there is a distinction. And the other aspect of that really caught my attention that is this idea of an initiation, which our young boys in society, culture at large in both our worlds, is largely disappeared from the culture. There is no healthy initiation. We can mention bar mitzvah, we can mention maybe the military, but I wouldn't say that they are holistically healthy. From a psychological perspective, in doing a good job at shocking the child's psyche into adulthood, right? And so we end up with Peter Pans, in their 40s, all of a sudden confronted with the burden of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And there is all manner of things that can be done to avoid that, right? The numbing, the denial, right? And so I wonder if you could speak into that, in particular, the denial piece.
Yeah. So, one, to become a man, one has to understand what is a man, right? Or what, or let's even shift this to become an adult, right? Because what it's really about is accountability. And to transform into adult philosophy versus child psychology, first and foremost, like one has to be willing to do the things that they don't want to do because
Mm.
it's the right thing to do. And it's really as simple as that, right? Because what will a child do that's steeped in child psychology? A child will do the things they want to do, period. My
Yeah.
children, when I ask them to do tasks or chores in the house, they might get some of them done, but they're children and they're going to go do what they want to do, and they're going to play video games, and they're going to avoid responsibility, and they're going to throw their clothes on the floor, and they're going to get on their phones when they're not supposed to, whatever the case may be, devices, because they're kids. And their brain, their prefrontal cortex, which is right here in the front, the last part of our brain that comes online, and it doesn't really come online. This thing's a Pentium chip till we're about 25, right? It doesn't come online until later in life. It's not something that's fully operational as a child. So one shouldn't have any other expectation than there will be in child psychology. But that's why I speak to specifically the Pan reference, and I think again Jordan Peterson does a great job of this, is like, okay, that works until you're about 25. And then it's time to, and now there's no excuses, right? Now one must be held accountable in life. And if you're not in a situation where you can have other good, safe people holding you accountable, because let's get this straight here, gentlemen. Most people, they don't want to be held accountable. That child within, the child psychology carries on to the 30s and the 40s, and instead it's like an effort attitude, and I'll do what I want. Okay, how's that working out for you? Doing whatever you want. How is gaming 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day working out for you? How is the porn addiction working out for you? How is the drinking in your 30s, 40s, 50s working out for you? The drugging, you name it, like the shopping addictions, the gambling, like how are these child psychological habits that are you're carrying into your older ops of decades in life working out for you? Because it only really leads to one thing. It leads to a death of despair, and this I promise you. And again, we have the data on that. So when it comes to the denial piece, it's taking a glimpse in the mirror, which I think we do a really nice job of in our program, and holding that mirror up for just long enough to understand, hey, maybe to quote Taylor Swift, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Maybe I have to take some ownership. I have to take cause in the matter, that I might have a little influence on the way my life's turning out. And again, one can avoid responsibility up until a certain point, and then you got to take life by the reins, and you got to take control to the best of your ability. And we can't control everything, but we can control. If we're a kind person, we can control if we work hard. We can control if we start to own things in our life, and these are the types of controls I'm talking about, kind of building into our daily practice.
And I think you do a wonderful job with an energy in that is captured in the sentence of ruthless compassion. And it's a particular energy and a vibration, a frequency to that saying, that ruthless compassion is, we're not going to tell you what you want, what you think you want to hear, right? We're going to tell you how it is. And this kind of descriptions that you're giving us here is exactly a prime example of it, because we want you to be joyful. We want you to be all that you can be, living into your potential and possibility. And so I think ruthless compassion is something that from the first day I heard that, over 2.5 years ago now, from you guys, it's just been a wonderful mantra.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the word ruthless on its own can be looked at as a pejorative term, right? It's like, oh, like that person's ruthless, meaning like they're a dictator or they're whatever. But when then you combine it with compassion, and it definitely it reframes it, right? And you're like, wow, like yeah, there's a ruthlessness to it. There is a no matter what, but there's a confrontational energy to it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Confrontation can also be reframed and looked at as nothing more than a courageous conversation. Most people in life are not willing to have courageous conversations. That's a big conversation. That means that are you willing to risk everything with that human being to have that conversation? And like I try to approach almost some of the more pivotal conversations in my life with very courageous conversations, because I don't have any fear. I don't let fear run me in the traditional sense that is I'd say to the detriment of most folks walking around every day. Like there is a fear, and we can get into that because that's a really important theme and subject of what's running most people as they walk around day to day.
Absolutely. I think and I'll hopefully sort of weave in the element of culture in a moment, because I think it's an important thing to hover on for a moment. But I feel like that fear is demonstrated in a couple of sort of gestures that we do or don't do. And I said right at the beginning, that uncomfortable hug is one, right? So that physicality of truly hugging and holding and just connecting, just that moment, is incredibly uncomfortable. And we can get into the reasons why potentially, but also staring into the soul of another human being and having an I-thou relationship through the eyes. Like eye contact is often something that is avoided in those, let's say, uninitiated in this experience. So yeah, I mean, it'd be great if you could just sort of talk into the uncomfortableness what's going on there? What's going on there for somebody potentially?
Just elaborate a little bit on the uncomfortableness with what specifically, Adam?
Let's just say holding or looking at someone in the eye, because a lot of people are often not wanting to make eye contact.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, you have to forgive me. I'm seeing all the chats coming in while you're talking to me, so I picked that up, but shame on me for trying to multitask. So it can easily certainly answer that one. It looks like we have a great audience on today as well, so look forward to answering some of the questions. There is a term of art that we use that is also steeped in some great ontological leadership out there, which is called getting out here with another human being. And when one can get out here, meaning if I'm out here with you, like we're having this conversation right now, then I'm not in here.
Yeah.
And it takes some looking, it takes some thinking to understand that. But like whether I'm on this, um, conversation this morning with you gentlemen, or I'm given the mic, let's say after I get done, I'm going to take my hat off, I'm going to comb my hair, I'm going to put on my Sunday best, and I'm going to go get on a stage with a microphone and talk to 10,000 people. I'm nothing more than out here with them. I'm not, this thing's not turning on. And again, that takes from a scientific perspective, it takes years to get down that path. The good news is I'd like to hope most of us have years, right? And like investing in a 401k or an ETF fund, the compound effect will eventually take effect, and it's just tying to the right baby, right? It's 11% growth every year, and that's what we've seen over time. That's what happens when you start to take your life serious, when you start to meditate, when you start to work on the breath work. You can disappear that automaticity, that voice that's been constantly going since childhood, and just get out here with another human being. So when I'm looking in somebody else's eyes, I'm not thinking about anything other than like I'm rooting for this person. I'm not thinking like, oh my gosh, what are they thinking of me? Do I have a zit on my face? Are we too close for comfort? What is it that I need to do after this? Like, I need to get out here. I'm not thinking all of those thoughts that would be in someone's head. None of those are there for me. It's just like I'm completely present. I'm looking at another human being and I'm wondering like, man, this is a wonderful human being. I hope they have a great life. Like, I'm so glad we have this moment to connect, because like I'm not guaranteed the next moment in life, right? So it's like that's what being aware, that's what being present is. It's getting outside of our minds that really largely for the most part are there to ensure we survive. That's the whole mechanism. So I talk about survival traits. There are some really nasty survival traits baked into our mind from lessons learned, from trauma, from a variety of situations that have occurred that are like codified in there. And we got to get in there and break that stuff up, and create these new neural networks. And the small wins allow us to start to do that. So that's the way I think about that, Adam. And I try to carry that in with me. And I'll know I'm not doing well if like those things are starting to creep in, and I'm like, oh, I can catch myself catching myself in life and say, maybe I need to spend a little bit more time like just getting present and getting aware, because like um the old automaticity starting to creep back in. And so I do my best on a daily basis to try to recognize that, and that allows me to just continue to go through life like trying to stay out here with people.
Beautiful. And this is a rhetorical question to everybody listening. What would that feel like? What do you think that experience would be like, to have the disappearing of the noise and the chatter and the preoccupation with the doingness, the doing of life, right? How would that feel?
Well, how it feels, because it feels like this for me every day, is it feels like I'm on cloud nine all the time, because I don't have fear. Like, and when I talk to the fear, I don't have a fear of looking bad, right? It's not about the fear of like spiders or sharks or jumping out of planes or kicking in doors. A lot of, particularly our veteran community, but first responders, you name it, we don't have those fears. We've signed up to do a dangerous job. We've signed up to put our bodies, our minds, our spirits in harm's way, so that the rest of the citizens have the incredible lives that they do. They have the freedom that they do, particularly in Western societies, right? In a free country. So like those fears generally aren't present for many of us, but there is always this fear from an archetypal perspective of like, I'm going to look bad. Like, what are they going to think of me? This magical piece we've put up. Well, I'll tell you what they're going to think of you. They're going to think terrible things. because they already do, right? And so let's just get that out of the way. And the quicker you can realize that, too, most people in your lives, that you come across with, whether it's at a cafe, whether it's out to dinner, whether it's in casual conversation, their minds are running them. They're not thinking about you. They're thinking about all the different things that are popping into their heads, things that they have to do, whatever's going on. They have their own lives, right? So we put way too much stock into what other people think. And so if once one can pierce that veil and can realize, hey, like that, none of that really matters. And you may see people right on TikTok, they have these big accounts, and they'll go on with a microphone and a t-shirt on, with messy hair, bedhead, and they'll just stand on a table in a cafe and just start singing, just to demonstrate. And people are just walking by in their daily lives, like, really, nobody really cares, right? And so a lot of people, we go through this limited life, right? We don't reach our full potential because we are worried, oh, what will they think if I take this entrepreneurial risk and I fail? Now I have to come around with my tail tucked between my legs in front of my family and friends while they say, I told you so, and smile, because people like to be right in life. Even at the behest of their relationships, people just like to be right. And it's like, all right, like it's the ability to take that risk and to put ourselves out there, that where growth really happens, where that struggle really happens. So like my encouragement for each and every one of the folks on this call is like, start taking an intentional approach to working through that, because and do something you traditionally wouldn't have done, because that's also the novelty. And novelty doesn't have to happen at Save a Warrior in a 72-hour experience. We can introduce novelty every day of our lives. We can do something we've never done. We can take a risk we've never taken, that's calculated, that makes sense, and just see how it turns out. And our brain, whether it's a success or a failure, is a very adaptable mechanism, right? This thing will learn. It's malleable. It will learn, hey, oh, I'm not doing that again. And that's what's all of those steps have led us up to this. But so many folks, as they get older and older in life, they just get more rigid and more, more almost, like I said, codified. And it's sad, because then that's when the drift's on, and it's like, well, I guess this is who I am, and this, I guess these are my limitations, and like this is it. Like I'm just getting by. It's as you would say in America, it's Groundhog Day, which means every day seems like it's the same.
And I think you're speaking into a very, very common, familiar pattern of experience that many have. And so we're speaking into, and I'm going to answer in a roundabout way Maxine's question here, which is essentially revolving around the cultural pressures that we all experience. But we may, in particular, if you've gone through a transformational initiation such as Save a Warrior, it's not like they go away. It's just that you're now able to see them for what they are, and you relate and interact with them differently, right? So how can you speak into those cultural pressures that, we all are obviously in a culture of sorts with its own parameters and programming, as you say, and, speak into that a little bit and how to sort of navigate it, and how do you navigate the cultural pressures?
Yep. So, I was fortunate enough to, at a young age, but certainly as I was coming to as a man, to be a part of the military, right, and to join something that really changed my life forever. And I went down this path where I really kind of had this attitude. I signed up for a contract to become a Green Beret in the United States Army. That's a special forces is what it is essentially. And our lineage is ties all the way to the SAS in the UK. It ties all the way to some of these storied units, the OSS here in the United States, which split up and ended up becoming the CIA and then Special Forces in the Department of Defense. But it's a very rigorous process, right? And I think it's there's a famous song by Barry Sadler that 3 out of 100 men earn the Green Beret, and the statistics hold true. I mean, it's a very, very challenging thing. You're taking the best, the brightest, the toughest that our military has to offer, and putting them through this rigorous training to see who comes out on the other side. And I think the average age of someone in Special Forces is like 32. So it's a much more mature soldier who has been their brains online, right? And they've been through this diplomatic training. They can do the diplomacy, and they can kick in the doors, and they can be trusted to ensure that a mission is fulfilled in some third world country, right, with a partner. And there are other units beyond that, tier 1 units, special missions units, that where things get even tougher down the road, and they're more elite, I guess, in training. But I had a sergeant major, so that's the highest rank in the U.S. military, like an E9, sit me down one time and say, "Hey, young man, this is an infantry school. Hey, young man, like I think it's admirable what you want to do. I saw that you're going out for special forces, but I just want to let you know, like you're not going to make it. I tried out myself. I didn't make it. It's okay. Like you're going to be a great infantryman." He kind of patted me on the back and walked away. So like that for me, that just that interaction really lit a fire under me. Cause I'm like, okay, like in the words of Muhammad Ali, like I'm gonna show you how great I am. So I kind of developed an ethos, a philosophy of like I will either do this or I will die. And like that may be a little extreme, you know. One, if you're a fan of Will Smith, the actor, he talks about, hey, if I go on a treadmill and you go on a treadmill and we're running against each other, the only way you're gonna beat me is if I die. And so like that philosophy is inside of me and anything that I do in terms of like it's either going to get done or I'm going to die. And that may be again a radical view of things, but that has allowed me to dive into all the necessary changes I've needed. Like that one thought helped get me through special forces training. It helped get me through a variety of different things that I've come up against in life. And what I've come to realize is like God willing, I'm not going to die. Like I just need to lean into the pain and I need to like show up. So like any of the reservations, the pressures culturally, I think like, all right, so for one, I'm not going to burst into flames. Like this isn't going to kill me. Two, how many of us on especially on this webinar have built things up, have built these pressures up, have built these stresses up, only for them to come and go and us realize like I didn't die, I didn't burst into flames, I didn't have a heart attack. Like, yeah, that was a tough challenge. Like that was a real challenge I just went through. But like I can do this. And like the more victories we get, the more we weather those storms. I think the stronger we get and the stronger we realize, like, hey, like I need to stop spending so much time in my mind worrying about these things. And I need to start spending time becoming the person I've always meant to be. And that comes through change of habit. You know, James Clear, who's from here in Columbus, by the way, wrote a book called Atomic Habits. Phenomenal book. If you haven't read it, it's probably on Spotify. If you have a subscription, you can probably read it for free on there or listen to it on audio. But these habits, these exponential habits, the meditating, the breathing, the building into, hey, I'm going to catch myself catching myself, the getting rid of the isms, right? Whether it's a process or a chemical addiction, the alcohols, it's the drugs, it's the food, right? Food or chemicals. It's much worse here in the United States because a lot of our politicians have been bought and paid for by the corporations. So like it's tough, right? Because a lot of our food's ultra processed over here. It's not real food anymore, and they've tricked our country into believing that a diet is just eating whole foods. Like, no, that's just, that's not going on a diet. That's just what we're supposed to eat every day. And in our supermarkets, most of the stuff is ultra processed and packaged. It's not real, right? So like it's making conscious decision. Like I'm shopping on the outside aisles. I'm only gonna eat that from now on. Hey, like I'm just gonna, I don't work out right now. I'm sitting on the couch. I'm gonna get up and walk every day. And walking may turn into running, which may turn into lifting weights. And like you could see how these things show up if you just make a decision right then and there. Hey, I'm going to stop doing that. That thing, those things I keep buying when my house gets crowded and I'm getting stressed because I have too much stuff in my home because capitalism and marketing has gotten a hold of me and I'm just buying things to buy them. Hey, I'm going to stop doing that. Like I'm going to develop some discipline. And those little decisions can change things for us. So like to the cultural thing, like yeah, there are expectations, but like my suggestion is be unreasonable with those and throw some of those out the window. You don't have to follow the status quo, and I think that's an entrepreneurial mindset. You don't have to, hey, I'm gonna go to school and then I'm gonna get a job and I'm gonna work for 40 years and then I'm gonna retire and then I'll enjoy a couple of years and then I'll be dead. Well, there's other paths we can go. Like there are new rules here in 2024. The technology has given us the capability to leverage it for good and kind of go down some of these new rules. I mean, look at us having this webinar right now. I know the things that you do, Adam, in your life outside of this. Technology can be used for good. So that's my answer on the pressure piece: is lean into it, lean into the pain, develop new habits, start to develop a maxim for yourself. Believe in yourself, and all you need is one small victory for your brain to have a new neural pathway to say, "Ooh, I like that. That feels good. Like let me get it. Let me go get another win." I don't care if that victory is just waking up an hour earlier than you normally do, making your bed, meditating, doing something to impact your daily habit will start to change and transform over time. And before you know it, it'll be like the Swiss train.
Yeah. So I want to speak into a question that Andrew's asked here. Essentially, he's asking for any guidance on noticing the signs or the flags of becoming withdrawn, either personally or amongst his friends, and what to sort of reverse those. And before I hand it over to you, Adam, I just want to sort of preface and emphasize this idea of first is about addressing the current limitations that are either self-imposed or been imposed as an experience, and the programming that ensues, and how those mechanisms are in place. If you then go ahead and try to do the changes and the habitual changes, if that's still your default, whenever it gets a little tough, that's the default. So that's the sort of reversal of that. So what we're talking about is disappearing that, and really becoming present and being. And so, you know, my question really, I guess, how do we describe, or how do we make a distinction or a definition of the majority what I experience out there in engaging with others are human doings, and what we're really offering is the possibility of becoming a human being? And what are the differences?
Yep. Yeah. So I'll just kind of relate this to the cohorts without giving away too much, but how we define and how we really create a distinction for the folks that we're working with is that, I start with that word fear. I think it's arguably one of the most important words in the English language, because it is a very, very important piece of a barrier that is established for many, many people early on. It's a psychological fear. And again, it's all related to like, how am I going to look? This is why people spend money on looking nice. This is why people will go down a career path that they hate only to earn money to buy things that run them. And they make, at some point they get fortunate enough maybe to have an experience like that, or sit on a webinar like this, or have a conversation with somebody and say, you know what, I'm not doing that anymore. Like, because like at the end of the day, I'm going to do what serves me and makes me happy. And I think that I have the gumption to go out there and make something in my life that's not this traditional path that's been laid out for, much of society. And we see that happen. We show many pieces of art, including one I just showed this weekend of a guy named Chris Bianco, who's a famous chef who arguably has been designated as the greatest pizza maker in the world. And he doesn't live in Italy. He doesn't live in New York City. He lives in Phoenix, Arizona. And people have gone and made the pilgrimage around the world to go see this man. And this man gave up everything in his life to basically move across the country from New York to Phoenix to sell mozzarella cheese in the desert, door to door. Does that sound like an untraditional path? But he said, you know what, I'm really, really good at this. I know how to tell stories. And we're storytellers and story listeners as human beings. That's all we are at the end of the day. If you want to go back tribally, generations and generations before, we come from a culture that's tribal. We come from a culture that's sitting around the campfire, telling these stories, these lessons, passing the wisdom on. So it's still in us, right? Even though Moore's law has, technology has accelerated, and it doubles, seems like every year, and we're seeing these advances. Our DNA epigenetically is not caught up. Like, we are still storytellers deep down in our soul and listeners. And this guy built an incredible life for himself, and that's a non-traditional path. What Jake created at Save a Warrior when he pawned his Rich watch 12 years ago, that's a non-traditional path to say, hey, you know what? I'm working at this company that's a Fortune 7 company. So it's one of the biggest companies in the world, not just United States. I'm going to go take this other path instead. Like, I have this cushy career. I can have it all in terms of like the pension and all these things. But like, this is what I truly believe in. And this is what I want to do with my life. I'm going to take this path. I'm going to take the road less traveled, per se. And it worked out, right? Like, and like, sometimes that doesn't work out the first time. There are lots of entrepreneurial stories where it doesn't work out to the 30th time, right? That's a challenge. But one can do things as a side gig. You don't have to just drop everything and say, "Oh, I'm going this route." And we have to live in reality, right? We have bills to pay, we have families, we have mouths to feed. But it does come with a different way of looking at the world. So we basically start with fear. We build that out. Hey, what's all right? So what's behind fear? And then boom, we build out basically what is going on in all of our lives. And generally, how I know people are getting what I'm throwing down is I'm pausing, I'm looking at the folks that are sitting in the seats. Again, we've had civilians, there as valued participants over the years. We've had actors, movie directors, artists, you name it. And it's all the same, right? And it's like, oh wow, like I've never thought about it the way. Like, I've been walking around thinking the Earth was flat, and you've just, told me it's round, and you've actually just proved it through what you've built out. And like, what did we know as civilization, years ago as a culture? If you are a fan of history, like at one point in time, there was consensus that the Earth was flat, right? Until it wasn't anymore. So it's the same idea. Is like you come and you sit in a seat. We build this out. We deconstruct what's actually going on for us internally, and we add science behind it, and then people are like, oh my gosh, I have never thought of it that way before. You have just created the distinction I've been looking for my entire life. And the Wachowski brothers did a nice job because they like created this film 25 years ago called The Matrix, which oddly enough, if you look walking around, you see people and they're just like, wow, maybe there is a matrix because most of society is operating in it on a daily basis. But we take that viewpoint, and then we work over the next 72 hours, Adam, to um, deconstruct it, to disappear it, to complete it, and then to declare what life could look like over on a blank board. And like, if you're an artist and you're trying to make art, and I give you two pieces of paper, right? I give you a piece of paper that's filled with scribble, scrabble, and scratch. And there's no room really for creation on that paper, which is our lives, right? These are all the different limitations that we've built up inside of our minds over the years, and all of the different mistakes maybe we've made that we're living with right now. And then we move over to a piece of paper that's blank. Well, I mean, which canvas would you prefer? And all we're giving folks is the opportunity to get to the blank canvas. And that doesn't happen overnight, but that kind of thinking can happen overnight, right? And sometimes life has to get worse for us in order for it to get better, because we've built our lives in the limited side. We've built our lives as we know them on the piece of paper that scribble, scrabble, and scratch. And some of us built that based on programming we believed in since we were a kid, a very limited programming. And it wasn't until later in life, when this Pentium chip came online, till we started to actually realize who we are and who we wanted to be, that we're like, holy crap, like I've just backed myself into a corner. How do I get out of this one? And there's ways to do that. And there's ways to start a day at a time, to start disappearing the past, start, really like thinking differently on a daily basis. It just takes time. And so that's the way that we like to think of it. A lot of folks come out with clarity. They're
Mhm.
unclear when they come and see us, and now there's a newfound clarity of like, I know what I want. Because if you ask most people to write down, hey, what if you could design your life, what would it look like ultimately? A lot of people can't answer that. There's too much going on in their heads. They can't answer what an ideal state looks like. So half of the battle is defining, well, where do I want to go from a compass perspective? Like, where do I want to point my compass and start to move towards, like, as an end state? And then, hey, how do I enjoy the journey along the way? Because life's really about the journey. There's no end state, but it's nice to have something to work towards.
Absolutely. Well, look, on that note, I'm aware of time. I want to respect everyone's time and their lunch break if they're here. And if you're watching in the recording, I just want to finish really with, first and foremost, just thank you. Thank you, Adam, for your time, your
Yep.
dedication, your example, your modeling, your mentorship. You're a true friend and a guide for me. And so thank you again. If somebody in America is listening to this, where do they go to apply for a seat?
Yep. So if you're listening to this in the United States, you can go, and you're a veteran, you can go to www.saveawarrior.org. And there's an application tab on the website where you fill out information as to why you think this might be a good fit for you. And then essentially you work with our enrollment team to go through that process, find a date, and get rostered for a cohort, which is that 72-hour experience you referenced. It happens on site. It happens in person over a 72-hour period, and it's in Ohio. It's at the National Center of Excellence for Complex Post-Traumatic Stress in Hillsboro, Ohio. So like, that's how that process looks. It's free. We pride ourselves on this remaining free. The only thing we ask is that you put some skin in the game and you pay for your travel. Because if we gave that away for free, You know, we've done the math on it, and you know, it's really easy to just send a text that morning, hey, I can't make it, something came up. But if you've got skin in the game, if you bought a ticket, chances are you're probably going to use that ticket.
Absolutely. And for us in the UK, everything is exactly the same.
Yep.
Only the website is saveawarrioruk.org. Trying to keep it as simple as we can. The process for application is exactly the same. And we are in Cornwall. That is our center of excellence for the foreseeable future, until we can get established ourselves in really creating the center of excellence that we know Save a Warrior deserves to have in the UK. And it's again, it's free to those who need it. Again, skin in the game. Get yourself there, get the ticket there. Thankfully, Britain is a lot smaller than the USA, so travel expenses are typically less, but nonetheless, it's still the same. Thank you for everybody who joined, watched, and engaged, and asked the powerful questions. And I just want to say, if you're thinking about applying, then please do. And or just finally as well, for any partners, any wives, girlfriends, or otherwise who may have somebody in their life that you feel intuitively could benefit from this, what is it that you would say, Adam, to that partner?
In terms of encouragement of coming through this?
Yeah, how do you communicate that to that person, you know, that might need it?
I'd say the biggest thing, one, is just being there for them. You know, it's being kind, it's having love for them, it's understanding that, like, one has to make this decision because they're ready to be done suffering. One can't be forced into it. And so sometimes just holding space is enough. Especially as a partner, sometimes we're a little too close to the chest. And it's really important, I think, for all folks to have outside counsel, to have other people in their lives they can lean on. Sometimes we don't want to burden our partner. And so just being there and having an understanding and supporting versus, nagging or pushing or trying to get under somebody's skin. I think those often backfire when you try that approach. And then people have more apprehension than ever to apply, because they're like, no, I'm not going to do what you say. And I think that speaks again to everyone wanting to have their own autonomy. No one in this world wants to feel like they're being controlled, coerced, pushed into something. So I think us just being gentle with our partners and being supportive and showing love, I think, is the most important thing, because that's what we really want from each other, is love and understanding. And I think one, again, it goes back to that kind of waking up. One will know when they're ready to be done suffering in life. And so again, that's why we have these conversations. That's why we go and speak to folks, is like, sometimes it's just hearing a conversation like this. Sometimes it's a partner saying, hey, just want to let you know, I saw this really cool thing. I'm just going to leave it here. Like, you should, like, it's worth checking out. I think it would add a lot of value to my life, but I think just knowing what you've shared with me, like, I think this thing would be great. And usually that's enough for them to at least give it a glimpse and go down that path.
Perfect. Adam, thank you ever so much once again, and I look forward to speaking soon.
Thank you, guys. Honor being here.
Thanks, guys. That's a wrap. Take care, everyone.